La dijeron morir en el desierto, pero un ranchero cambió su destino. Her family had decided to move to a new city, hoping for opportunities they never had in their small hometown. They had packed their belongings into old, worn-out carts and loaded them with whatever they could carry. The journey ahead was long and difficult, but Maria felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never been on such a long trip before, and the thought of leaving everything familiar behind made her heart race. The desert stretched endlessly in front of them, a vast ocean of sand and rock under a sun that seemed to burn brighter each day. The heat was unbearable, and the wind often carried clouds of fine dust that made it hard to see or breathe. The family moved slowly, step by step, as they tried to conserve energy. Maria's younger brother, Miguel, kept asking questions about what they would find at the end of the journey, and their parents did their best to answer, although they themselves were uncertain. Every day was a test of patience and endurance, and Maria tried to stay positive, even when the sun beat down relentlessly. As the days passed, the journey became more exhausting. Water was scarce, and every sip had to be carefully rationed. The sun rose higher in the sky, scorching the sand and making it almost impossible to walk without feeling the heat searing through her shoes. Maria noticed that some of the people traveling with them were growing impatient and angry. The constant struggle, the lack of rest, and the harsh conditions seemed to change them. Arguments broke out over small things, and fear began to spread like wildfire. Maria felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach every time someone raised their voice. She tried to focus on her family, on keeping Miguel close and supporting her parents, but the tension around her was becoming harder to ignore. One day, as they reached a particularly barren stretch of the desert, a disagreement erupted among the travelers. They argued over supplies, over who was slowing the group down, and over who was responsible for the difficulties they were facing. Maria watched as tempers flared and saw fear and frustration replace kindness. She felt uneasy as she realized that some of the people she had trusted might not have her best interests at heart. The sun was merciless that day, and the heat seemed to intensify the conflict. Voices became louder and words sharper. Her heart pounded as she held Miguel's hand tightly, feeling the fear creeping into her chest. Without warning, the group made a sudden decision. They claimed that Maria and her family were slowing them down, and that it was too dangerous for everyone to continue together. They said they could not carry extra supplies for those who struggled to keep up. In a cruel twist, they decided to leave Maria and her family behind. Maria's heart sank. She could not believe what was happening. She pleaded, tried to explain that they were just trying to survive, but her words fell on deaf ears. The group moved on, leaving them behind under the scorching sun. The desert that had already been so unforgiving suddenly felt endless, a place with no escape, no mercy, and no hope. The first moments after being abandoned were terrifying. Maria looked around and saw only sand and rocks stretching to the horizon. Her family tried to calm each other, but fear and despair were hard to fight. They knew they had to keep moving, but every step was exhausting. The sun was unrelenting, and the air seemed to shimmer with heat, making the desert look like a place that was both real and unreal. Maria's lips were dry, and her throat burned with thirst. The little water they had left was barely enough for one sip each. Her body felt heavy, as if the sun had filled her with lead. Each step became more difficult than the last, and she feared that they might not be able to go on much longer. Despite the overwhelming fear, Maria refused to give up. She remembered her mother's words, "No matter what happens, never give up. Keep moving, keep fighting, and help each other." She tried to encourage her family, reminding Miguel that they could survive if they worked together. They shared small sips of water, tried to find shade under occasional rocks, and rested whenever they could. But the desert seemed to mock their efforts. Every time they thought they saw something promising, like a distant patch of shade or a small tree, it turned out to be nothing more than a mirage. The sun burned their skin and the sand burned their feet, yet they pressed on, driven by hope and the will to survive. Hours turned into a long, grueling day. The heat felt unbearable and their bodies were weakening. Maria felt dizzy, her vision blurred, and a heavy exhaustion weighed down every part of her. The desert was silent except for the wind, which carried whispers of doubt and fear. Her family leaned on each other, helping one another move forward, but the lack of food and water was taking a toll. She saw the pain on her parents' faces, and it broke her heart. They had tried so hard to protect her and Miguel, but now they were all at the mercy of the harsh, unforgiving desert. Maria tried to keep her mind occupied. She thought about her childhood, her friends, the games she used to play, and the small joys she often took for granted. She remembered the stories her grandmother told her about courage and resilience. She repeated them in her mind like a mantra, trying to summon inner strength. She focused on Miguel, who looked up at her with wide, fearful eyes. She knew she had to stay strong, not only for herself but for him as well. Every step they took was a small victory, a defiance of the desert that sought to crush them. As night began to fall, the desert transformed. The heat of the day was replaced by a chilling cold, and the sand seemed to bite at their skin. Shadows stretched across the dunes, making the desert feel even larger and more intimidating. The sky was filled with stars, a beautiful but distant comfort. Maria wrapped herself and Miguel in what little blankets they had, trying to preserve warmth. Their parents encouraged them to rest, to conserve energy for the next day. Sleep was hard to come by, as the desert was both unfamiliar and threatening, and the thought of being alone and abandoned made it almost impossible to relax. Throughout that first night, Maria's mind raced. She imagined all the worst scenarios, each one more frightening than the last. She thought about what it would mean to be lost forever in the desert, to be forgotten and never found. Tears came to her eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to give herself over to despair. She whispered promises to Miguel that they would survive, that they would see their new home, and that they would find safety. Even in the face of unimaginable fear, Maria clung to hope, believing that help could come, even when everything seemed impossible. By the time the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Maria and her family had survived their first night alone in the desert. The sun rose slowly, casting golden light over the endless dunes. Their bodies ached, their skin was burned, and their spirits were tired, but they were still alive. Maria felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. She knew the journey ahead would be even harder, but the first day had proven that they could endure, that they could fight for survival. The desert was merciless, but so was her will to live. Maria took Miguel's hand and encouraged her parents to keep moving. Every step was a struggle, but they continued together, supporting each other through the pain. They had no idea what lay ahead, but they knew that they could not give up. The desert had tried to break them, but their bond and determination were stronger than the harshness surrounding them. With each step, Maria felt a small spark of hope, a quiet assurance that survival was possible and that perhaps somewhere someone might help them. And so Maria's journey through the desert began, not as a simple trip, but as a test of courage, resilience, and hope. The desert was vast, lonely, and unforgiving, but it had also begun to reveal Maria's inner strength, a strength she would need in the days to come. She did not yet know that help was closer than she imagined, and that her life would soon change in ways she could never have expected. But for now, she had to keep moving, step by step, holding onto hope like a lifeline, and trusting that she and her family would survive another day in the relentless desert. The morning sun rose over the desert, painting the endless sand dunes with a warm golden light. Maria, her parents, and little Miguel were tired, sore, and thirsty, yet they knew they had no choice but to continue. Every step was heavy, and the heat of the day promised to be as harsh as the day before. But Maria refused to let fear or exhaustion take control. She reminded herself that they had survived the first night, and that was proof they could keep going. The desert was a strange and unforgiving place. There were no trees, no rivers, no familiar signs of life, only rolling sand, jagged rocks, and the occasional cactus. The sun blazed overhead, making the sand shimmer like fire. Each step seemed to sink deeper into the hot sand, pulling at their feet, testing their resolve. Maria's throat was dry, her lips cracked, and sweat poured down her face, yet she pushed forward, holding Miguel's hand tightly. She whispered encouragements to him, telling him they would find water soon, even though she didn't know if that was true. As the hours passed, fatigue began to weigh heavily on all of them. Maria's parents struggled to maintain their energy, and Miguel grew increasingly tired and scared. The younger boy clutched his sister's hand, his little legs wobbling with each step. Maria felt a deep sense of responsibility for him. She knew she had to stay strong, not just for herself, but for Miguel and for the hope that her parents needed to keep going. Every time she felt her own strength slipping, she closed her eyes briefly, took a deep breath, and reminded herself that giving up was not an option. The desert seemed endless, and the sun's intensity made time feel as though it had slowed. Shadows barely existed in the vast openness, and the only sound was the whisper of wind across the sand. Every movement stirred dust into the air, making it even harder to breathe. Maria's body ached from walking on uneven terrain, from carrying a small pack of supplies, and from the constant worry about her family. Yet, she refused to succumb to despair. She reminded herself that surviving the desert was as much about determination and clever thinking as it was about strength. They searched for signs of life, hoping to find water or a place to rest. Every distant shimmer in the sand seemed like an oasis, only to vanish as they approached. These mirages toyed with their minds, making hope and disappointment come in quick succession. But Maria refused to be discouraged. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about courage, patience, and never giving up. Those lessons were alive in her mind, giving her the courage to continue, even when every part of her body screamed to stop. By midday, the heat became unbearable. The sand seemed to radiate the sun's energy, scorching their feet even through their worn shoes. Sweat drenched their clothes, and Maria could feel her skin burning under the unrelenting sun. Her parents leaned heavily on each other, their steps slower with each passing hour. She noticed how every person in her family had changed already. They had become quieter, more focused on survival, yet a shadow of despair hovered over them. It was a quiet suffering, the kind that goes unnoticed until it is too late, yet it strengthened Maria's determination. She could not allow hopelessness to take root. Maria tried to keep her spirits high. She looked at Miguel and told him stories, making up small adventures in the desert to distract him from the heat and fatigue. Miguel giggled weakly at first, then listened intently as she spoke of hidden treasures in the dunes, of animals that could talk, and of magical springs that healed the weary. The stories did not make the desert easier, but they offered a small spark of joy, a reminder that imagination and hope could survive even in the harshest places. Maria felt her own courage growing with each story she told. As they walked, the family began to notice changes in the landscape. The dunes gave way to rocky hills, and patches of sparse vegetation appeared here and there. Small shrubs and thorny bushes provided tiny pockets of shade, enough to rest for a few moments. Every time they found shade, Maria urged everyone to sit and regain strength. She would help her parents drink water slowly, and she would encourage Miguel to take deep breaths and relax. Even though their supplies were running low, the small moments of relief gave them a chance to prepare for the next challenge. Despite the small comforts, the desert remained relentless. The wind picked up, carrying dust and tiny pebbles that stung their skin and eyes. Maria wrapped a scarf around her mouth and nose, trying to protect herself and Miguel from the blowing sand. Her parents did the same. The air was hot, dry, and heavy, making it almost impossible to breathe deeply. Each step required immense effort, and yet they pressed on, step by step, driven by the knowledge that stopping could mean disaster. By late afternoon, Maria noticed that Miguel's energy was waning. His small hands trembled and he leaned heavily on her shoulder. She knelt beside him, offering him the last drops of water they had saved for emergencies. "We are almost there," she said, hoping her words were true. She brushed the sand from his hair and kissed his forehead, giving him a sense of safety and warmth. Her own strength was waning, but she refused to show weakness. In the desert, fear and hesitation could spread quickly, and she had to be the anchor for her family. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, the desert changed colors. The golden light shifted to deep oranges and reds, and the shadows grew long and dark. The beauty of the sunset was both calming and cruel. It reminded them that time was passing, and darkness would bring new dangers. The cold of the approaching night was already beginning to seep in, and Maria knew that surviving the night would be as challenging as enduring the day. She encouraged her family to keep moving until they could find a place to rest safely. Every dune climbed and every rock crossed was a small victory, a testament to their will to survive. The family finally found a small depression in the sand, surrounded by low rocks. It was far from perfect, but it provided a slight shelter from the wind and some protection from the cold night. Maria and her parents worked together to set up a small resting area, using pieces of cloth and blankets to create a place for Miguel to lie down. They shared the little food they had, eating slowly and carefully, trying to conserve energy. Even in exhaustion, they reminded each other to rest, to regain strength for the challenges that awaited them the next day. That night, Maria stayed awake for a long time, watching over Miguel and her parents. The desert was quiet, but every sound, wind, sand shifting, distant animals, made her heart race. She reflected on the journey so far, on the cruelty of those who had abandoned them, and on the strength her family had shown in the face of danger. Her mind wandered to thoughts of survival, courage, and hope. She understood that the desert could be cruel and unforgiving, but it could not take away the determination of a heart willing to fight. As Maria finally drifted into a light sleep, she made a silent promise to herself. She would do everything in her power to keep her family alive. The desert had tested them, but it had not defeated them. They had survived the first day and night, and she knew they could survive the next. The fire of hope burned within her, small but bright, a beacon that would guide them through the endless sand and heat. No matter how harsh the desert became, Maria was determined to protect her family and to reach safety, step by step, day by day, with courage, patience, and hope. The desert stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, an ocean of sand that seemed to go on forever. Maria's body ached, and every step felt heavier than the last. Her muscles were stiff, her throat parched, and the dry wind scraped against her skin like tiny needles. Yet she refused to give in to despair. Her mind focused on Miguel and her parents, who leaned on her for strength and guidance. Each moment of fatigue was a challenge she met with determination, a quiet promise that she would not let them down. Hours passed in a slow, relentless march across the barren land. The sun rose high, casting a harsh, golden light across the dunes. Mirages appeared in the distance, small shimmering pools of water or clusters of trees that vanished as soon as they approached. Every illusion was a cruel trick, yet Maria held on to hope. She reminded herself that hope, even if it seemed impossible, was more powerful than fear. Miguel's small hand gripped hers tightly, and she could feel his tiny heart beating fast, filled with both fear and trust. She whispered to him, "Keep walking, we will find help." "We have to." By midday, they had been walking for what felt like an eternity. Their supplies were running dangerously low. A few sips of water remained in their canteen, and the small pieces of food they had brought had nearly vanished. Maria distributed the remaining water carefully, making sure Miguel got enough to survive. Her parents took turns resting while she encouraged them to keep going. The desert had a strange way of testing their patience, stretching time and energy until the limits of endurance seemed to disappear. Every rock, every dune, every grain of sand was a challenge, but Maria refused to let it defeat them. As the afternoon sun scorched the desert, Maria noticed something unusual in the distance, a figure on horseback. At first, she thought it was a mirage, another trick of the heat and light, but the figure grew clearer as it approached. It was a man, riding slowly but steadily across the dunes. His wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, and his posture suggested experience and confidence. He was unlike anyone Maria had seen in the desert, and a sudden surge of hope rushed through her. Could it be that someone had come to help them? "Look, someone's coming," Maria exclaimed, pointing toward the rider. Miguel's eyes widened with a mix of fear and excitement. Her parents, exhausted but alert, turned to see the approaching figure. The man seemed to notice them immediately, slowing his horse as he drew closer. He called out, his voice strong and calm, asking if they were all right. Maria felt a rush of relief. This was the first time in days that someone had shown concern for their well-being. The sight of another human being, someone who could help them, brought tears to her eyes. The man arrived beside them, dismounting from his horse with practiced ease. He introduced himself as Don Julian, a rancher who lived nearby and was familiar with the desert. He offered them water and food without hesitation. Maria gratefully accepted, feeling the cool liquid soothe her parched throat and the small meal replenish her drained energy. Don Julian's calm presence had an almost magical effect, calming the fear and anxiety that had weighed heavily on them for days. For the first time since being abandoned, Maria felt a glimmer of safety. Don Julian listened patiently as Maria explained what had happened, how they had been abandoned, how they had struggled through the desert, and how close they had come to losing hope. He nodded with understanding, never judging them for their misfortune. Instead, he offered words of encouragement, reassuring them that they were not alone and that they could survive. His kindness and confidence were like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. Maria felt her heart lighten just a little, and Miguel clung to her hand with renewed hope. After ensuring they were rested, Don Julian led the family to his ranch, a place that seemed like an oasis in the harsh desert. The ranch was surrounded by green pastures, small ponds, and shaded areas that offered relief from the relentless sun. Maria and her family could hardly believe the transformation. From the barren, endless desert, they had found a safe haven filled with life and hope. Don Julian made sure they were comfortable, giving them clean clothes, fresh water, and a proper meal. Every small gesture, from offering a blanket to helping Miguel wash his dusty face, conveyed care and compassion. As the day turned into evening, Maria observed her surroundings with awe. The ranch was alive with the sounds of animals, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the soft murmur of water in the small ponds. It was a sharp contrast to the silence and emptiness of the desert. She could feel her body relaxing, her mind finally able to rest after days of fear and struggle. Her parents expressed gratitude to Don Julian, their voices full of relief and disbelief. For Maria, it was a moment of profound realization. Even in the darkest times, human kindness could shine like a beacon of hope. Don Julian spent time teaching the family about the desert, explaining how to navigate it safely, how to find water, and how to protect themselves from the harsh conditions. He shared stories of survival and resilience, illustrating that the desert, while dangerous, was also a place where life could thrive if treated with respect. Maria listened intently, absorbing every word. She realized that knowledge and preparation were as important as courage when it came to survival. She also understood that the lessons learned here could save her family in the future. Throughout their time at the ranch, Maria noticed the gentle way Don Julian treated everyone, not just her family. He had a quiet strength, a mix of wisdom and compassion that made him trustworthy and dependable. He checked on them frequently, making sure they had everything they needed to regain strength. Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude for him. Without his timely intervention, they might not have survived the desert. It was a powerful reminder that one person's kindness could change the course of another's life forever. As night fell, Maria and her family gathered near the small fire Don Julian had prepared. The sky above was filled with stars, shining brightly in the clear desert night. It was a peaceful moment, a sharp contrast to the chaos and fear of the previous days. Maria held Miguel close, feeling the warmth of his small body and the steady rhythm of his breathing. She reflected on their journey so far, on the dangers they had faced, and on the miraculous encounter that had brought them safety. She realized that survival was not just about enduring hardship, it was also about recognizing and accepting help when it came. Maria could finally sleep without fear. The desert, once a symbol of danger and despair, had now become a place of learning and growth. The encounter with Don Julian had shifted the balance from hopelessness to hope, from fear to courage. She knew that challenges still lay ahead, but for the first time in days, she felt prepared to face them. Her heart was filled with gratitude and a quiet determination to honor the chance at life that had been given to her and her family. The following morning, Maria woke to the sounds of the ranch, the soft clucking of chickens, the gentle lowing of cows, and the distant barking of a dog. She felt stronger, nourished, and more determined than ever. Don Julian greeted them with a smile, reminding them that the journey was far from over, but that they had already taken the hardest steps. His guidance and care had provided them with more than physical sustenance. It had given them hope, confidence, and a renewed sense of purpose. Maria understood that this encounter had changed her family's destiny. Days passed at the ranch, and Maria's family slowly regained their strength. Every day, she noticed small improvements in Miguel's energy, her parents, resilience, and her own confidence. Don Julian continued to teach them about the desert and how to navigate it safely, giving them tools and knowledge to prevent future dangers. Maria listened carefully, absorbing every detail. She realized that survival was not just a matter of luck, but also of preparation, courage, and human kindness. Maria often reflected on how close they had come to disaster. She thought about the people who had abandoned them, the relentless sun, the endless sand, and the fear that had gripped them for days. And yet, she also recognized that without that struggle, she would not have discovered her own strength or the kindness of Don Julian. The experience had taught her that life was unpredictable, that danger could appear at any moment, and that survival often depended on resilience, courage, and the generosity of others. By the time Maria and her family were ready to continue their journey, they were stronger, wiser, and more prepared. The desert still loomed ahead, but it no longer felt impossible. With Don Julian's guidance and the lessons they had learned, they were equipped to face the challenges of the harsh landscape. Maria knew that their encounter with the rancher had changed their fate. They had been abandoned, left to struggle in a merciless desert, but now they had hope, knowledge, and strength. Their journey was far from over, but they were no longer alone, and that made all the difference. After the rescue by Don Julian, Maria and her family slowly began to recover at the ranch. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, they could sleep without fear, eat without worry, and rest without the constant anxiety of the desert pressing down on them. Every morning, the sun rose over the green pastures of the ranch instead of the endless sand dunes, casting warmth and hope into their hearts. Maria noticed how different everything felt. The air smelled fresher, The water tasted sweeter, and even the smallest sounds like the wind rustling through the trees seemed magical. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe fully, feeling the weight of exhaustion slowly lift from her shoulders. Her parents were equally relieved. They were weak, sunburned, and mentally drained from the ordeal, but the safety of the ranch gave them a new sense of hope. They spent hours resting, eating nourishing meals, and slowly regaining their strength. Maria watched them carefully, understanding that while they were safe for now, they would need her support to fully recover emotionally. Miguel, though still timid, began to play again, laughing softly as he chased chickens around the small courtyard. His laughter was a balm to Maria's heart, a sign that life could continue even after the harshest trials. Don Julian treated them not just as guests, but almost like family. He made sure they were comfortable, giving them clean clothes and helping them bathe for the first time in days. He shared stories of his life on the ranch, teaching them the skills needed to survive in the desert and showing them how to care for the animals. Maria listened attentively, absorbing every lesson. She realized that knowledge could be just as important as courage when it came to survival. The ranch was not only a place to recover physically, but also a school where she learned about resilience, respect for nature, and the importance of patience. Each day, Maria and her family followed a gentle routine under Don Julian's guidance. They helped feed the animals, water the plants, and repair fences. Though the work was tiring, it gave them a sense of purpose and helped distract them from the horrors they had recently endured. Maria felt proud as she worked alongside her parents, realizing that even in the midst of recovery, small accomplishments could restore confidence and hope. Miguel eagerly participated as well, giggling as he chased a goat or collected eggs from the chickens, slowly regaining the energy and joy that had been stolen from him in the desert. Maria often spent quiet moments reflecting on her journey. She remembered the exhaustion, the thirst, the fear, and the despair she had felt while wandering through the sand. But now, in the calm and safety of the ranch, she could see how far they had come. The desert had tested them in every possible way, and though it had been cruel, it had also revealed their strength. She realized that survival was about more than just physical endurance. It was about hope, determination, and the will to continue despite seemingly impossible odds. Don Julian had not only saved their lives, but had also shown them that compassion and guidance could transform fear into courage. One afternoon, as Maria rested under the shade of a large tree, Don Julian came to speak with her. He explained how important it was to understand the desert and respect its challenges. "The desert is harsh, but it is also honest," he said. "It shows who can endure, who can think clearly, and who can care for others. You have already shown these qualities, Maria. That is why you survived." His words struck a chord deep within her. She realized that survival was not just about escaping danger, but also about learning, adapting, and growing stronger in the process. Maria began to apply what she had learned immediately. She helped her family organize their remaining supplies, taught Miguel small lessons about safety, and practiced navigating the ranch's terrain. Each success, no matter how small, gave her confidence and restored her spirit. She began to understand that every challenge could be faced with patience and careful thought. The lessons Don Julian shared were not only practical, but also deeply philosophical. He spoke about resilience, kindness, and the importance of helping others, teaching Maria that true strength came from both the heart and the mind. As the days passed, Maria noticed changes within herself. Her fear of the unknown began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. She felt more capable, more resourceful, and more determined to face whatever the future held. The desert, which had once seemed like an endless enemy, was now a teacher that had shown her the depth of her courage. Maria understood that the trials they had faced were not just obstacles, but opportunities to discover the strength hidden within her family and herself. Every scar, every blister, every moment of exhaustion was now a mark of resilience rather than defeat. Her parents, too, showed remarkable recovery. They were no longer the exhausted, fearful people who had trudged through the desert days earlier. Under Don Julian's guidance, they began to regain their confidence, learning that with preparation, care, and determination, they could overcome even the harshest circumstances. Maria felt a deep sense of pride in them, realizing that the journey had changed everyone in subtle but profound ways. Even Miguel, whose small body had been so vulnerable, grew stronger and more confident each day. His laughter returned fully, and he began exploring the ranch with curiosity and joy, a living reminder that life could continue after hardship. One evening, as the family gathered around a small fire, Maria reflected on the events that had brought them to this moment. The desert had been merciless, stripping them of comfort and safety. They had faced hunger, thirst, and fear, and yet here they were, alive, learning, and growing stronger. Don Julian sat with them, sharing a quiet smile and stories of the desert's secrets. Maria realized that while the desert had tested them, it had also given them clarity, resilience, and a newfound appreciation for life. She understood that the kindness of one person could change the course of a family's destiny, and that hope could emerge even in the harshest conditions. Maria also began to notice how much she had learned from her family's struggles. She had witnessed her parents' perseverance, Miguel's courage despite his small size, and her own determination to continue even when every step seemed impossible. These lessons were not abstract, they were practical tools for life. She felt empowered, knowing that she could face challenges, support others, and make thoughtful decisions even under pressure. Every day at the ranch reinforced these lessons, building her confidence and preparing her for the future. By the end of their stay at the ranch, Maria and her family were transformed. They were physically stronger, mentally sharper, and emotionally resilient. The trauma of the desert remained in their memories, but it no longer controlled them. Instead, it became a source of strength, a reminder of what they had overcome. Maria realized that survival was not just about endurance. It was about learning, adapting, and valuing the people who helped along the way. Don Julian had given them more than shelter and food. He had given them the tools and confidence to continue their journey and thrive beyond the desert. Maria's recovery at the ranch was also a time of reflection and gratitude. She appreciated the simple things: a clean drink of water, a safe place to sleep, the warmth of a fire, and the laughter of her brother. Every small moment became precious, and she learned to cherish life even more deeply. She understood that resilience was built not only through struggle, but also through reflection and appreciation for every moment of safety and kindness. The ranch became more than a place of recovery. It became a place of learning, growth, and transformation. By the time they prepared to leave the ranch, Maria felt ready to face the challenges ahead. The desert still lay beyond, but it no longer seemed insurmountable. She had learned how to navigate it, how to respect its dangers, and how to rely on hope and knowledge to survive. Her family was stronger and more united than ever, and she felt confident that they could handle the journey ahead. The lessons learned at the ranch would guide them, giving them courage, wisdom, and strength. Maria looked at Don Julian with deep gratitude. He had changed their destiny, turning what could have been tragedy into a story of survival and growth. She realized that one act of kindness could have ripple effects, saving lives and shaping futures. The desert had tested them, but through resilience, learning, and human compassion, Maria and her family had emerged stronger and ready for whatever lay ahead. Their journey was far from over, but the experience at the ranch had prepared them for every challenge yet to come. By the time Maria and her family were ready to leave the ranch, they had been transformed in ways they could not have imagined. Their bodies were stronger, their minds sharper, and their spirits more resilient than ever before. The fear and exhaustion that had once weighed them down had been replaced with determination, hope, and gratitude. The desert, which had seemed so cruel and endless, now appeared as a challenge they could face together. Each of them had learned valuable lessons from the ordeal, and the guidance of Don Julian had left a lasting mark on their hearts. Maria looked at her parents and saw a renewed strength in them. They walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and smiled more easily. Her father, who had once seemed defeated by the journey, now carried himself with pride, having regained the courage to face the unknown. Her mother, who had been constantly worried for her children's safety, now exuded calmness and determination, having seen that survival was possible even in the harshest conditions. Miguel, small and fragile at first, had grown stronger and more confident. His laughter returned fully, and he explored his surroundings with curiosity and joy, a living testament to the family's resilience. As they packed their few remaining belongings and prepared to leave, Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude toward Don Julian. His timely intervention had saved their lives, and his guidance had prepared them for the challenges that lay ahead. She realized that the rancher had given them more than food, water, and shelter. He had provided knowledge, wisdom, and hope. Maria understood that the kindness of one person could change the course of a family's destiny. She silently promised herself that she would honor his generosity by living fully and helping others whenever she could. The journey back into the desert, though still daunting, now felt different. The family moved with purpose and confidence, applying the lessons they had learned at the ranch. They knew how to ration their water, how to find safe resting spots, and how to protect themselves from the harsh sun. Each step was taken with awareness, each decision guided by knowledge and experience. The desert was no longer an enemy to fear, but a challenge to respect and navigate carefully. Maria felt a quiet pride in her family for their resilience and adaptability, and she knew that together they could face whatever lay ahead. As they traveled, Maria reflected on the journey they had endured. She remembered the moments of despair, the blinding heat, the thirst that had seemed unbearable, and the fear that had threatened to paralyze them. Yet she also remembered the courage they had shown, the moments of hope that had kept them moving, and the kindness of Don Julian that had changed their fate. Every experience, no matter how difficult, had shaped her into a stronger and wiser person. She realized that life's challenges could be opportunities for growth, and that survival was not just about enduring, but also about learning and evolving. Along the way, Maria began to notice how her perspective had changed. She had once seen the desert as a place of danger and hopelessness, but now she understood it as a teacher. It had tested their limits, pushed them to their breaking points, and shown them what they were capable of. The experience had revealed their inner strength, patience, and resilience. She also recognized the importance of community, trust, and compassion. Don Julian's help had shown her that even in the darkest moments, there are people willing to extend a hand and change the course of a life. As the family continued their journey, they encountered other travelers and people along the way. Maria found herself offering advice and assistance whenever she could, sharing the lessons she had learned from the desert and the rancher. She showed others how to find shade, conserve water, and remain calm under pressure. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, gave her a sense of purpose and fulfillment. She realized that her own survival had a greater meaning. It allowed her to guide and support others who might face similar challenges. Her experiences had not only saved her life, but had also prepared her to help others in meaningful ways. By the time they reached the edge of the desert, Maria felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The journey had been grueling, but they had survived, learned, and grown stronger together. The harsh desert that had once seemed impossible to overcome had now become a symbol of their resilience and courage. Maria looked back at the sand dunes stretching into the horizon and felt gratitude, not only for the lessons they had learned, but also for the people who had helped them along the way. She understood that every struggle, no matter how difficult, carried with it the potential for growth and transformation. When they finally arrived in the new city, Maria and her family felt a sense of triumph. They had faced nearly impossible odds, survived the desert, and emerged stronger than ever. The city offered new opportunities, but Maria knew that the lessons of the desert and the ranch would remain with them forever. She was determined to live fully, appreciate every moment, and continue helping others in need. The experience had shown her that life could change in an instant, and that hope, courage, and kindness were the most powerful tools for survival and growth. Maria's life continued to be shaped by the experience. She dedicated herself to learning and growing, using the lessons she had learned to navigate challenges with wisdom and courage. She became a source of guidance and support for others, sharing her story and helping those who faced difficulties. Her family, once fragile and fearful, became strong, confident, and united, a testament to the power of resilience, love, and hope. Maria often reflected on the desert and the ranch, realizing that the struggles they had endured had prepared them for a brighter future. Even years later, Maria never forgot Don Julian. She remembered his kindness, his wisdom, and the way he had intervened at the exact moment they needed him most. She understood that his actions had changed the course of their lives, turning what could have been tragedy into survival, growth, and hope. Every time she thought of him, she felt gratitude and inspiration, knowing that one person's generosity could have a profound impact on the lives of others. His lessons had become a guiding force, shaping how she approached challenges, treated others, and faced life's uncertainties. Maria also realized that her journey had taught her the value of resilience and hope. The desert had tested every aspect of her being, and the experience had revealed the depth of her courage, determination, and empathy. She understood that life would always bring challenges, but she now possessed the tools to face them with confidence. Every struggle, every moment of fear, and every act of kindness she had encountered had contributed to her growth. Maria knew that the lessons of survival were not just for the desert, they were for life itself, shaping her into a person capable of overcoming adversity with strength and compassion. As Maria and her family settled into their new life, they carried the lessons of the desert and the ranch with them. They faced challenges, adapted to new environments, and continued to grow stronger as a family. The hardships they had endured had strengthened their bonds, taught them the value of resilience, and shown them the power of human kindness. Maria understood that their survival was not just about endurance. It was about learning, adapting, and using experiences to grow. Every day she applied these lessons, living with purpose, gratitude, and determination. Maria's story became one of inspiration. She shared her experiences with others, teaching them about courage, hope, and resilience. She reminded people that even in the most difficult circumstances, survival was possible, and that help and kindness could appear when least expected. Her journey through the desert and the guidance of Don Julian had transformed her into someone capable of guiding others, turning a story of survival into a story of empowerment. Maria's life was forever changed, but the lessons, strength, and gratitude she carried ensured that she would continue to thrive. In the end, Maria understood the true meaning of her journey. The desert had been cruel, but it had revealed her strength. The encounter with Don Julian had saved her life and given her family a second chance. The lessons she had learned about hope, resilience, and compassion would stay with her forever. Maria knew that life could be unpredictable and harsh, but she also knew that courage, knowledge, and kindness could change destinies. Her journey had taught her that even in the darkest moments, hope could shine, and one person's generosity could alter the course of many lives. Maria's story, once filled with fear and uncertainty, had become a story of survival, growth, and transformation. From the desert to the ranch, from despair to hope, she and her family had endured and emerged stronger. The challenges they had faced had shaped them, teaching lessons that would last a lifetime. And Maria, carrying the wisdom and gratitude from every step of her journey, moved forward with courage, ready to face the future, help others, and live a life filled with hope and purpose.